Hi guys, as you have figured out, I'm not going to be in class today. I'm part of some other stuff that's going on. So unfortunately, it's another second hour hit. What we're going to do is a flip lesson on the end of the 2.2 notes. And we're going to go ahead and start the 2.3 notes today. And then tomorrow what we'll do is the quiz. And after you're done with the quiz, you can continue the flip notes. My goal is that we will be done with period 2, the end of the day Thursday, the beginning of Friday. So let's get started. All right, we left off with talking about the Andean South America and kind of their civilization. All right, the Mohe. In the Andean mountains, many advanced cultures arose during the classical era. The most powerful are going to be the Mohe, who lived in present-day Peru between about 200 and 700 current era. Like a lot of other societies in the region, the Mohe used that knot-tying system of recording Quipu, Q-U-I-P-U, I can never pronounce it correctly, I'll be honest. And they lived in clans, which owned lands communally. Like a lot of other kind of political elites that lived in the Andes, the warrior priests who govern the Mohe are going to compel those communal clans to perform labor according to the Nitia system, which is a combination of kind of like serfdom and the Cove labor. Members of these clans would typically farm land owned by the elite, tend to the llama and alpaca herds, or build roads, bridges, terraces for crops. Those living in the valleys grew quinoa, corn, and potatoes, and the coastal areas are going to do a lot of fishing. They're going to trade along the Amazon River to provide and kind of round out their diets with fruits. The Mohe are going to be known for their excellent ceramics and textiles, not all that surprising when you consider the civilization that kind of was their parent civilization was also known for ceramics and textiles. Their society is going to be very stratified, that pyramid, but not politically united under a single state. What makes the kind of Mohe kind of unique is this almost confederacy of the way they work. There's no written script available, so historians are having to do a lot of kind of guessing and theorizing. But the thought is that the Mohe culture is going to end because of a combination of environmental factors, shifting in the river due to an earthquake, natural erosion caused by heavy rainfall, and then kind of some interference from military rivals. So the Mohe, after about 500 years, are going to kind of fall apart. When we look at some comparisons, diplomacy, this idea that there's more than one way of winning a battle than just military strategy and using advanced weapons, diplomacy means the negotiation with allies or foes. It's crucial for these big imperial kind of conquests that we see happening during the classical era. For example, when the Han dynasty goes westward, they come into conflict with these kind of powerful nomadic tribes. In the wars with these tribes, Emperor Wu, the Han Emperor Wu, is going to kind of bring this up to a stop, I guess, by seeking alliances with small countries on the western border. He's going to offer a Han princess in marriage in order to secure himself an ally. Using these allies is going to help him defeat those nomadic tribes. This kind of matrimonial alliance is pretty common with empires in the classical age. It works pretty well. Another form of diplomacy is the creation of a tributary state. The Gupta dynasty is going to use this method pretty well on a lot of occasions to kind of bring stability. After defeating rival kingdoms, he's going to allow a defeated king to keep his rule, providing pays Gupta emperor a determined price called a tribute. This is often a more practical alternative than trying to rule a remote kingdom directly. In the tributary system, a defeated king basically purchases the right to continue to rule from the victor, which makes them kind of an indirect subject to the conquering power. The average person in a tributary system does not, your peasant is not going to experience much of a difference. Their daily life is going to stay the same. It's the elites that are going to experience a difference under the tributary system. When you look at the classical civilizations, somewhere between like 200 and 600 current era, all of them have fallen apart. The Han falls apart around 220, Western Rome in 476, and the Gupta Empire in 550. When we look at these, there are several elements that we can draw commonalities to and how they all fall. Political corruption and deterioration. The politics of all classical ages become corrupt and given over to divisions and factions of power. Bribery and favoritism common across all of them. Provinces come under control of local leaders, empires decentralize, and things politically just kind of fall apart. Migration of the Huns. Generations, Central Asia was home of the nomadic group called the Huns. Droughts are going to force them to kind of migrate south and westward. This is going to bring them in contact with classical civilizations. They put pressure on the Han and the Gupta empires, attacking their frontiers and raiding their lands. And as they move westward, they're going to force the Germanic people, the barbarians, according to the Romans, to have to try and then find a safer place. So the barbarians, or the Germanic peoples, are going to get squished kind of between the Huns and the Romans. And let's face it, the Romans aren't as scary as the Huns. And as the Roman Empire is falling apart, the Germanic tribes are going to move into Roman territory. Overextension of borders. All empires find that during the classical era that their borders have grown so large that they're hard to maintain. Their ambition is going to be bigger than the resources they have to maintain it. The Chinese are not able to effectively man that Great Wall to keep out the Huns. Rome gets so large they cannot raise an army big enough to protect its frontiers. The last reason you got is the spread of epidemic diseases. The trade routes that connect civilizations are going to spread three big things. And I'm going to hit you guys over the head with this. Three big things. Goods, which is their general purpose. Ideas, and disease. Trade routes that connect these civilizations allow them to spread the diseases in ways that hadn't spread before. Han China and Rome are going to lose thousands to disease. And this is going to deplete their tax base just at the time they need those taxes the most to protect those borders. So some specific kind of case study looks at the fall of classical civilizations. We're going to look, oftentimes we compare Han, China, and Rome. So about 100 current era, the Han start to decline. Bureaucrats become corrupt, bribery is widespread, as the supervision of central government begins to decline. A lot of local landlords step up to take more control of their provinces. This leads to decentralization of political power. Local aristocrats add their own taxes to already high tax burdens. This is going to force a lot of peasant farmers to sell their land. Some peasants sell their children into slavery to try and get out of debt. It's bad. And you guys know, world history truth bombs. High taxes, low yield means hungry people. Hungry people topple governments. And that's exactly what starts to happen here. As more of the wealth falls into the hands of fewer people, peasants hated the merciless forces that seemed to be beyond their control. This leads them to revolt. A revolutionary movement emerges called the Yellow Turbans. These are led by Taoists, and they're going to attract the farmers, the scholars, eventually even a few disillusioned government employees. But they attack these kind of wealthy, corrupt bureaucrats and direct a lot of their rage at the emperor himself. Hundreds of thousands of people joined in on this rebellion, and they believe they're kind of bringing in this new era of peace and prosperity, and the phase where the earth, whose color in Chinese mythology is yellow, gains kind of power. So eventually they're going to fail, but this feeling of despair that drives them does not, and the Hans never really fully recover from this rebellion. Making it worse, there's a lot of several devastating kind of epidemics that wipe out almost half the Chinese population. The death of so many peasants is going to mean less grain, and less taxes available for the government. So just about the time the government needs the resources of more taxes to deal with the Huns, they can't collect it because their people have been dying of diseases. Speaking of those Huns, they keep invading. Eventually the Han are going to fall in 220, and China temporarily falls into a period of disunity. Even though the Han fell and initiated a period of chaos, there's no kind of permanent disruption of the Chinese civilization, even though the Han dynasty falls. Their kind of concept of being Chinese is going to continue uninterrupted throughout history. So the fall of the Roman Empire is pretty complex, and still historians are going to kind of argue about it, but there are some things they are going to agree upon. That as the Roman Empire grew, it required more and more soldiers to patrol those frontiers. This is a pretty high tax burden on a population that's already decreasing because of those diseases that are getting spread along the trade routes. Along with this, emperors in the upper class are getting more and more extravagant in their lifestyle and expecting these citizens, these taxpayers, to pay for that. This is not only going to cause a lot of resentment among the lower classes, but the upper class becomes more self-centered and less concerned about being culturally and politically responsible. So they're not kind of creating any new cultural styles. They're not creating any new artistic styles. They're just kind of getting fat, lazy, and selfish. So this is going to weaken the politics. This is going to weaken the economy, culture, and even the psychology of the empire. They just don't have the strength or the fight in them to fight off these Germanic invaders. So as the empire starts to weaken, farmers and laborers start to cluster around powerful regional landlords in order to get that protection. They can't rely on the Roman legions to protect them. So they find a rich, wealthy landowner nearby and say, hey dude, I'll give you my land, you give me protection. And we start to have these kind of private armies, which decentralizes the government even more. Diocletian is going to try and stop this disintegration by dividing what he thinks is an empire that's too big for one person to rule into zones, and to persecute any Christians whose allegiance to their god he. So Diocletian divides it, starts persecuting the Christians, and then a little bit later on, Emperor Constantine, who converts to Christianity himself, is going to try and use religion to unify the empire under one kind of spiritual togetherness, but it's really kind of too late at this point. So he creates a new capital in the eastern half of their empire called Constantinople. And however, the problem is Constantinople is in the center of where all the profits and richness is in the empire, and they start really kind of ignoring the West. The last Roman emperor is going to be displaced by the Germanic armies in the year 476. So 476 is usually agreed upon, marked end year of the empire. One of the things that's unique about the fall of Rome, however, is that the eastern portion doesn't fall. We talk about the fall of Rome, we're actually talking about only half of what had been the Roman Empire. The eastern half of the empire, with Constantinople as its center, as its capital, is going to continue, but it's going to switch names. It's going to become known as the Byzantine Empire, really kind of for the rest of its kind of peak in history. The environmental consequences that come with the classical civilization. Obviously, deforestation, the mobilization of resources required by classical empires is going to have huge environmental consequences. Settled people and the need for surplus agriculture is going to lead to a lot of deforestation of huge tracts of land. Entire forests are going to be cut down to provide, lumber, fuel, and to extend farming areas. Where there was once an abundance of wood in the mountains, you can only see the skeletons of the land. And of course, this leads to poor soil and over farming, and we wind up with all kinds of problems that come environmentally from this era. Of course, we keep mentioning those invasions. The internal problems of empires described, the Han, the Gupta, Roman Empire, are going to be exacerbated by external problems on their frontiers. All classical civilizations had to deal with migration and invasion of nomadic peoples, every single one of them. The Qin and the Han struggle against the Zanu Confederacy, and we have to see, the invasion of the Huns is a huge factor in the collapse of the Han. The White Huns invaded the Gupta Empire, and they're going to kind of expose the inability of its, decentralized system to coordinate together well enough for a unified defense. As they push against those Germanic tribes near Rome, the frontiers of the Roman Empire start to weaken, and as resources are too scarce to sustain a defense, the barbarians wind up at the gates of Rome, and in 476 are going to bust through.